She didn't leave because she stopped loving him. She left because she finally started loving herself. And the moment she walked out that door, the moment she chose herself over the chaos, over the silence, over the slow erosion of everything she used to be, something extraordinary began to happen inside her body. Not just in her mind, not just in her emotions, in her body, her cells, her hormones, her nervous system, her heartbeat. Because here's what most people don't understand about toxic relationships. The damage isn't just emotional. It isn't just psychological. It is biological. It is chemical. It rewires the brain, floods the body with poison, and silently dismantles the woman standing inside it. And what happens when she leaves? What happens when she finally, after months or years of surviving on the edge of herself, decides that enough is enough? The science will shock you. The transformation is real. And if you are watching this right now, whether you have already left, whether you are thinking about leaving, or whether you are sitting in that familiar silence, wondering if what you're experiencing is even real, this video is for you. Stay with me, because what I am about to tell you changes everything. Let's start at the very beginning. Let's start with what toxic relationships actually do to a woman's body while she is still inside them, because you cannot understand the healing until you understand the wound. When a woman is in a toxic relationship, whether it is defined by emotional abuse, manipulation, constant criticism, gaslighting, unpredictability, or any combination of these, her body is not simply uncomfortable. Her body is in a state of chronic biological emergency. The human body has a stress response system. You've probably heard of fight or flight. When you sense danger, your brain triggers a hormonal cascade. Adrenaline floods your muscles, cortisol surges through your bloodstream, your heart rate climbs, your digestion slows, your immune system steps back, and every resource in your body is redirected toward one single goal: survive. This response is brilliant in short bursts. It is what helps a person run from a predator. It is what sharpens focus in a crisis. It is a gift that kept our ancestors alive. But it was never designed to be permanent. In a toxic relationship, a woman's body activates this response constantly. Every argument, every cold shoulder, every moment of not knowing which version of him she's going to come home to, every time she scrolls through his phone with shaking hands, every dinner eaten in silence that feels louder than screaming, every night she lies awake, wondering what she did wrong, even when she did nothing wrong at all. Her nervous system cannot tell the difference between a predator in the woods and a partner who humiliates her in front of her friends. The threat is a threat, and so the alarm never stops ringing. This is what scientists call chronic stress, and the consequences inside a woman's body are devastating. Her cortisol levels, that primary stress hormone, remain persistently elevated. And elevated cortisol over months and years does things to a body that most people would never associate with a relationship. It disrupts sleep at the cellular level. It causes inflammation throughout the body. It suppresses immune function, making her more vulnerable to illness, infection, and disease. It interferes with thyroid function, with reproductive hormones, with the gut microbiome. It causes the hippocampus, the part of the brain most responsible for memory and emotional regulation, to physically shrink. Let me say that again. Chronic relationship stress can physically reduce the size of the brain structure responsible for memory and emotional regulation. This is why so many women in toxic relationships feel foggy, feel forgetful, feel like they can't think straight, feel like they are losing their minds. They are not losing their minds. Their minds are being chemically altered by a relationship that never deserved them. And then there is the heart. Emotional pain, the kind produced by betrayal, rejection, and chronic relational stress, activates the same neural pathways as physical pain. The same parts of your brain that light up when someone breaks your arm light up when someone breaks your heart repeatedly, every single day. Studies have shown that women in chronically stressful relationships have significantly higher risks of cardiovascular disease, hypertension, and stroke. Broken heart syndrome is a real medical diagnosis. Stress cardiomyopathy. The heart muscle weakens in response to intense emotional trauma. Doctors can see it on a scan. It looks like a broken heart. And then there is the gut, Because the gut and the brain are connected through the vagus nerve in ways that science is only beginning to fully understand. Chronic relational stress disrupts gut bacteria, causes irritable bowel syndrome, triggers acid reflux, bloating, nausea, and pain. This is why so many women in toxic relationships struggle with digestive problems that their doctors can't seem to solve. The problem isn't in their stomach. The problem is sleeping in their bed. Their muscles hold tension they can't release. Their jaw clenches at night. Their shoulders live somewhere near their ears. Their body is braced, always braced, for whatever comes next. And through all of this, she often blames herself. She thinks something is wrong with her. She thinks she's too sensitive, too emotional, too needy. She doesn't realize that her body is simply responding intelligently to an environment that is genuinely harming her. She is not broken. She is responding correctly to something broken. And then, one day, she leaves. Now let's talk about what happens next. Because the healing is not linear. It is not immediate. It is not a straight line from pain to peace. The first thing that happens when a woman leaves a toxic relationship is not relief. The first thing that happens is withdrawal. And this is where so many women are blindsided. This is why so many women go back. Not because they want the relationship, but because leaving feels like coming off a drug. And that is not a metaphor. That is neuroscience. Toxic relationships, particularly those involving cycles of abuse and affection, what psychologists call intermittent reinforcement, create patterns of dopamine release in the brain that are nearly identical to addiction. When a woman receives a rare moment of warmth, of kindness, of affection from someone who also causes her pain, her brain floods with dopamine. The reward system lights up more intensely precisely because the reward is unpredictable. This is the same neurological mechanism that makes slot machines so addictive. You don't pull the lever because you always win. You pull the lever because you might win. And the uncertainty is what makes it impossible to stop. So when she leaves, when the relationship ends, her brain doesn't celebrate. Her brain goes into withdrawal. Dopamine drops. The reward system that had been repeatedly activated is suddenly starved. She feels a craving that is visceral and physical. She reaches for her phone. She replays every memory. She focuses on the good times. She convinces herself it wasn't that bad. She wonders if maybe this time would be different. This is not weakness. This is chemistry. And understanding this, truly understanding that what she feels in the first days and weeks is biological withdrawal and not a sign that she made the wrong choice, is one of the most powerful things a woman can know. Because on the other side of withdrawal is freedom. Her brain begins to heal. Let's talk about what happens at the neurological level in the weeks and months after she leaves. The brain is not static. It is not fixed. It has a property that scientists call neuroplasticity, the ability to rewire, to rebuild, to create new pathways and new patterns. And when a woman removes herself from a chronically stressful environment, her brain begins to do exactly this. The hippocampus, that structure we talked about, the one that had been physically shrinking under chronic stress, begins to recover. New neurons grow. This process, called neurogenesis, was once thought impossible in adults. We now know it happens. And it is stimulated by the removal of chronic stress, by exercise, by sleep, and by safe, nurturing environments. Her memory starts to come back. The fog begins to lift. She starts to feel like she can think again. Like the lights in her mind are slowly coming back on after years of dim and flickering darkness. Her amygdala, the brain's threat detection center, which had been in a state of near constant activation, begins to quiet. The alarm begins to lower. She stops flinching at raised voices. She stops analyzing every text for hidden meaning. She stops rehearsing arguments in her head at 2 in the morning. Her prefrontal cortex, the seat of decision-making, impulse control, and self-awareness, begins to function more clearly without the constant fog of cortisol clouding it. She finds that she can make decisions again. She finds that she trusts herself again. She starts to understand which choices are hers and which ones were made in fear. And the cortisol, that relentless, body-corroding stress hormone, begins to drop. This is not instant. It takes time. But study after study confirms it. When women are measured before and after leaving abusive or toxic relationships, their cortisol levels drop measurably. Their inflammatory markers decrease. Their immune function improves. Their sleep quality changes dramatically. Let's talk about sleep. Because sleep is not just rest. Sleep is medicine. Sleep is when the body repairs damaged tissue, when the brain processes and consolidates memory, when growth hormone is released, when immune cells are rebuilt, when the emotional events of the day are sorted and filed and metabolized. In a toxic relationship, sleep is almost always compromised. Whether it's lying awake in anxiety, being kept up by arguments, sleeping next to someone whose presence feels like a threat, or simply never being able to fully relax because some part of the nervous system always has to stay on guard. The sleep she gets is not restorative sleep. It is survival sleep. When she leaves, when the house is quiet and the threat is gone, her body begins to sink into something it may not have experienced in years: real sleep, deep sleep. The kind where the body finally lets go. She might sleep more than usual in the early weeks. This is not depression. This is healing. Her body is catching up on years of rest it was denied. And in that sleep, things are happening at the cellular level that words can barely capture. Her heart rate variability, a key measure of nervous system health and resilience, begins to improve. Her growth hormone releases properly. Her skin starts to look different, clearer, more alive, because her body is finally being allowed to regenerate. Then there is the hormonal revolution. Chronic stress suppresses reproductive hormones. Cortisol and estrogen exist in a kind of biological competition. When cortisol is consistently high, estrogen and progesterone are consistently disrupted. This is why so many women in toxic relationships experience irregular periods, painful cycles, reduced libido, fertility challenges, and symptoms that mimic perimenopause long before their time. As cortisol drops in the weeks and months after leaving, the reproductive hormonal system begins to rebalance. Estrogen levels stabilize. Progesterone, the calming, sleep-supporting, mood-regulating hormone, rises back to healthy levels. Libido, which had perhaps been absent for years, not because she was not a woman of desire, but because her body had deprioritized everything that wasn't survival, begins to return. She starts to feel like herself again in ways she can't quite name. A warmth, a spark, a hunger for life that she thought she had simply outgrown. She had not outgrown it. It had been suppressed, and now it is returning. And then the immune system. Let's spend a moment here because this one is remarkable. The immune system is profoundly sensitive to emotional and relational environment. A groundbreaking field of study called psychoneuroimmunology has spent decades mapping the connections between emotional experience and immune function. What it has found is both disturbing and deeply hopeful. Disturbing, prolonged psychological stress, including the stress of a toxic relationship, measurably suppresses immune function. Natural killer cell activity decreases. The body's ability to fight viruses, bacteria, and even cancer cells is compromised. Women in chronically stressful relationships get sick more often, heal more slowly, and have higher inflammatory markers, which are linked to conditions ranging from arthritis to heart disease to autoimmune disorders. Hopeful. When the source of stress is removed, immune function rebounds. In some studies, dramatically. Women who leave toxic relationships show measurable improvements in immune markers within months. Their bodies begin fighting for them again, because their bodies are no longer fighting themselves. She stops getting every cold that goes around the office. Her chronic headaches begin to ease. The fatigue that had been her constant companion starts to lift. The body that felt like it was always one step behind begins to feel, slowly, like an ally again. Now let's talk about something that doesn't get discussed enough. Let's talk about the body she comes home to. When a woman is in a toxic relationship long enough, she often stops inhabiting her body. She dissociates from it. She stops feeling hunger until she is desperate. She stops feeling cold until she is shaking. She stops recognizing tiredness until she collapses. She ignores pain, physical and emotional, because there has been so much pain that tuning it out became a necessary survival skill. She leaves her body. Not metaphorically. She actually loses the felt sense of living inside herself. Psychologists call this interoceptive disconnection, the ability to sense and respond to what is happening inside your own body. Your own hunger, your own emotions, your own needs is systematically blunted by chronic trauma and stress. And when she leaves, when she is safe, she begins the long, remarkable process of coming home to herself. She starts to feel her own hunger. She starts to eat when she is hungry and stop when she is full. She starts to feel tiredness as information rather than inconvenience. She starts to feel her emotions moving through her body. Grief as weight in the chest, joy as lightness in the limbs, anger as fire in the belly, rather than as experiences she needs to manage or suppress or hide. She cries. She cries a lot. And this is not a sign that she is not healing. This is a sign that she is. Because tears are the body releasing what it has been holding. Because a woman who has suppressed her emotions for years, who was told her feelings were too much, too dramatic, too irrational, that woman, when she is finally safe enough to feel, feels everything. And it is sacred, and it is painful, and it is the beginning of becoming whole. She starts to move her body again. She walks. She dances in her kitchen at 7 in the morning because no one is there to make her feel silly for it. She starts to exercise not to control or punish her body, but because her body asks to move and she has learned to listen. And the movement, every step, every stretch, every exhale, produces BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the protein that literally promotes the growth of new brain cells and new neural connections. She is not just moving her body, she is growing her brain. And then there is the voice. Because here is something that happens to women in toxic relationships that is rarely talked about. They lose their voice. Not metaphorically, their actual voice. The vocal cords are connected to the vagus nerve. The vagus nerve is the highway of the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest system that is the opposite of fight or flight. In chronic stress, the vagus nerve is suppressed. And one of the subtle, strange symptoms of this is that women's voices change. They become quieter, more careful, more measured, more apologetic. They begin to speak less, laugh less loudly, take up less sonic space because they have learned, through 1,000 tiny corrections, that their authentic expression is not welcome. When she leaves, when the vagus nerve begins to recover, her voice comes back. She laughs without covering her mouth. She speaks in meetings without rehearsing every sentence first. She says no without following it with an explanation. She disagrees without waiting for the consequences. Her voice, her laugh, her opinions, her humor, all of it comes back. And the people around her, the friends who had watched her slowly disappear over months or years, begin to see glimpses of the woman they thought was gone. She was not gone. She was in hiding. Let's talk about what happens to her sense of self. Because toxic relationships don't just harm the body. They perform a specific, slow kind of psychological surgery. They replace the woman's inner voice with the abuser's voice. They replace her instincts with his interpretations of her. They replace her reality with his version of it until she no longer trusts what she sees, what she feels, or who she is. This is gaslighting, and its effects on a woman's sense of self are profound and lasting. But the self does not disappear. It goes underground. It goes quiet. It waits. And when she leaves, when the voice that told her she was too much or not enough or lucky to be loved is no longer present every day, there is silence. And in that silence, her own voice begins to speak again. Softly at first, uncertain, testing. She likes this song. She likes waking up early. She likes her eggs scrambled, not fried. She prefers blue to red. She used to want to travel to Portugal. She still does. These sound like small things. They are not small things. These are the landmarks of a self. And every tiny preference reclaimed, every small pleasure re-inhabited, every opinion held without apology is an act of profound reconstruction. Her identity comes back to her piece by piece, and she holds each piece like something precious. Because it is. There is one more thing I want to tell you, and it is perhaps the most important thing of all. There comes a moment, different for every woman, but it always comes, when the healing is no longer just the absence of pain, when it becomes something new, something that wasn't there even before the relationship, something forged in the experience of surviving something that should have broken her and discovering that it didn't. Psychologists call it post-traumatic growth, and it is real. Women who have survived toxic relationships and done the work of healing, who have faced the withdrawal and the grief and the identity reconstruction and the slow return to their own bodies. These women come out of that process with something extraordinary, a clarity they didn't have before, a sensitivity to their own needs that was never this developed, a ferocity in their self-respect that nothing will ever touch again, a compassion for other women in pain that comes not from sympathy, but from knowing, and a relationship with themselves, deep, honest, loyal, non-negotiable, that no future relationship will ever be able to undermine. She is not just healed, she is rebuilt, on stronger foundations, with her eyes wide open, with her arms wide open, toward a life that is finally, completely, beautifully hers. If you are in the middle of this right now, if you are somewhere in the early days of leaving, or the aching middle of withdrawal, or the confusing quiet of a life that finally doesn't hurt, I want you to hear this. What you are feeling is real. What happened to your body is real. What is happening to your body right now? The healing, the confusion, the grief, the strange flickers of joy. All of it is real, and all of it is valid, and all of it is part of something that is moving in you, even on the days when you can't feel it. You are not starting over. You are starting from everything you now know, and what you know about yourself, about love, about what you will never again settle for, is worth more than anything you left behind. If this video reached you today, I want you to know that was not an accident. Share this with someone who needs to hear it. Leave a comment below telling me where you are in your journey. Even just a word. Here. Beginning. Healing. Free. Your story matters. Subscribe if you believe that women deserve to understand what is happening inside their own bodies. And that knowledge is one of the most powerful forms of healing there is. And if you want to go deeper, I have a video coming next on what happens to your body when you finally start choosing yourself every single day. You are going to want to watch that one. Until then, take care of your body. It has been waiting so long for you to come back to it. And you are almost home.